I've been making plans for running the fuel lines on Beefcake, so we've got the Teflon lines I mentioned in previous videos. And I'm going to be running those underneath the car, so I don't want to run them through the car for safety reasons, and I don't want to run them through the tunnel because I can't easily secure them and stop them from moving around and being noisy. But before I attach them to the bottom of the car underneath the floor pan, it made me realise I need to clean the floor pan up big style. So I undersealed it in about 1996 and ran it for a couple of winters back then, which I'd say it worked a treat. But then in '98 it came off the road after an accident, and then it spent 20 years being rebuilt. And then I noticed, since it's been back on the road now in the last couple of winters, you can see that the metal's starting to get exposed as the underseal's dried and it's hardening off. So it needs to come off. Now, if you look online about how to remove underseal, there's a few methods suggested. There's the old-fashioned scraperoonie, probably a heat gun, and I'll probably have to do this anyway in the nooks and crannies and the smaller tight spaces to get the underseal off, and then you wipe off any small amounts of residue with thinners and stuff. Some people will suggest using dry ice. Apparently if you fill the floor pan full of dry ice, it gets that cold that any underseal underneath goes really hard and brittle, and you can bang it off, it cracks off. But I don't know where you'd even get dry ice from. I've never seen the dry ice shop. I know what it's made of, but I don't know how to make it that cold. So yeah, that's an interesting idea. However, I was talking to a friend of mine, and he very kindly suggested I borrow something off him, which is this bad boy, and it's a Monty Bristle Blaster. It's a wheel that spins around, or a belt that spins around with needles on it, and they ping off this bar, and then effectively they create like a shot blast effect. You've got lots of little needle hits on the metal. Apparently for removing older, dried up, hardened underseal and paint, it works an absolute treat. And it also gives you the added benefit of like a sandblast effect on the metal, so it's perfect for keying some decent epoxy paint and stuff under there. So we're going to give this bad boy a try and see how this performs. Unfortunately, I didn't realise before I accepted it how much it's actually worth. And this is £1,000 worth of kit, and the belt on it alone is just under 30 quid for a single belt. So yeah, we're going to order another belt because I don't want to risk damaging or wearing out his belt at that price. So we're going to order another belt and we'll give it a whirl. And thank you very much, dude. It's appreciated. Before we make a start on the car, I thought we'd do a quick comparison. So I've got a piece of metal, it's vaguely smooth, it's just got a bit of surface rust on it. And I thought we'd do a quick go over the wire wheel, one with the flappy paddle and one with the Bristle Blaster. So it's all next to each other. We should hopefully be able to see the difference of the finish that they leave. Now for years and years I've used these, I've just used wire brushes. I never knew it was a problem, I never knew there was any issues with that. And I've used that for prepping metal, cleaning metal up, removing underseal, everything really before I paint it. But if you look into what some people suggest, and they're saying that it polishes the surface when you use these, which gives you a nice shiny surface, but that's not good for paint to key to. So it's not optimal in terms of making your paint stick, basically. And also apparently it can drive in impurities into the metal. Again, never heard of this personally, but it can drive just salts into the metal, so you get corrosion underneath the paints again. Whether that's true, I don't know. Also, I've used flappy paddles, so this one's a 120 grit and it's well worn. So for that reason I would use it on thinner metals such as a floor pan and stuff. Probably not for removing the underseal and stuff, probably no good for that anyway. But for cleaning old paint off on a floor pan or thin panel, if you're gentle with this and it's well worn and it's a finer grade, you should be okay. But just be very, very careful. It's easy to do damage fast with these things. Going to use the medium-sized wheel, so it's a fair comparison between the different wheels. I've invented a new measurement today. Well, not invented, I've stolen it from school days. But so for anyone who went to school via a bus or coach, they may well know what a fusty is. and this Bristle Blaster has a fusty distance. So that's the distance between the little fingers there and where they create maximum pain on the subject, whether it be the child in front of you or the piece of metal you're cleaning. So as the bristles turn around, so they flick off this bar and they kind of flick just below it here. So that's where all the energy is. Obviously it's spinning at a bit more speed than that. So you have to keep your workpiece about there, the correct fusty distance. Wow. Well, that isn't what I expected at all. So obviously the first one here is the wire. You can see it is shiny, it is relatively smooth, and that's the surface I've always kind of worked from for painting onto. In the middle you've got the flappy paddle. If you can see, it's not perfectly smooth. You can see how the wheels cut into the metal in places. So you do have to be careful. So even with a 120 grit, which is well worn, it still bites in look and you end up with a non-smooth surface or non-perfectly flat surface. But then look at the Bristle Blaster. That's bonkers. So it's hard to show you the comparison, but it's so rough in comparison. It really is. I mean, in terms of a surface for paint stick to, that's just unbelievable. I've got a nail just to try and show you, to try and compare. So how relatively smooth the wire section is. See, a bit more rough where the flapper paddle is. You can barely run the nail over the Bristle Blaster part. That's so well keyed, that's just crazy crackers. The other thing as well is it took probably about half as long to do that little section as it did the other two. I expected the Bristle Blaster to be really slow, and it's not at all. So far, very, very impressed. So we'll give it a try on the floor pan now and see how it takes underseal off, or old underseal, and blasts at the same time. I've got beef up on stilts, so I'm trying to keep it covered because I suspect I'm going to make a lot of mess. And welcome to my dungeon for the next week or two. When beef first hit the road again about 2 years ago, the floor pan looked pretty reasonable. It had a nice even coating of black, so it looked well protected, although it was something on my list to do at some point. And then minimal running in the winters for 2 years, and so I try not to use it in the bad weather and the salt, but what a mess it now looks. So obviously the underseal's gone hard and flaky look, water's got under it, salt's got under it in the grit, and it's made an absolute mess. And so this is probably one of the worst sections, so we're going to start here and see what the Bristle Blaster does. Found a hole. That's absolutely amazing. That's cleaned up so fast. It's a lovely surface for painting on. I am absolutely blown away how well that works. Expect to get dirty, guys. Oh, plopper, bright. Right, come and have a look. So I've been at this for an hour, and in that time I've managed to do basically half a floor pad, and I kind of got up to the rear frame horns and had a little tickle around there. So on the flat stuff, it really motors. So when you're on the flat pans, it clears the underseal off, and say ever so fast. It's really quick. It gets a little bit trickier when you get to the seams and stuff like here. You can make it work, but you have to be a bit more patient with that sort of stuff. Curves stitches around here you can do. It does manage to go around curves like that. However, when you get to such as the frame horns and suspension there, because the Bristle Blaster is so bulky, it's like a large angle grinder, you just struggle to get into around things like It's pretty hard to show you how clean the floor plan is now compared to before when it was covered in underseal. So I've been under here for about 2.5 hours in total over a couple of evenings, and this is kind of the stage I've got to. So both the floor pan halves and the spine and some of the channel areas and bits and pieces are now missing underseal. However, it looks pretty rough. You're probably thinking, I don't look very good at all. I'd say it looks pretty bad. It was recommended when I borrowed the blaster. He said that it would flash rust very, very fast. As you can see, this part here was done 2 days ago, and it has flash rust really quickly. I was recommended to use phosphoric acid. I personally use K-Rust. It's just one I've used for years. So I think it's a similar thing, and that should give it a protection short term, so until I come to paint it. However, I want to go over again because you can probably see I've missed parts, so I'm actually going to put another belt on the Bristle Blaster, go over it again, and get all the bits I've missed and make sure everywhere's got a really good keyed surface. 2.5 hours in, it's looking pretty worn out, so all the bristles are getting a bit mangled up now. It's still clearing underseal off okay. It's like 1,000 angry hamsters scratching away, but it's not giving that really good shot blasted surface, which I say when it first started it was doing a really good job of, and it's now just tickling a little bit. So time for a belt change. So I believe the belt's supposed to do 2 meters squared, and it's done a full 4 pan more or less, so it's done about that. So it's time to change the belt for a new one, and then I'm going to go over it and cover the bits hopefully I've missed, and make sure everything's cleaned and prepped before I treat the metal. That kind of brings you on to probably the kit's biggest disadvantage, which is cost. So another belt's going to be 30 quid unless you can find some second-hand new old stock ones or something online. And obviously £1,000 for the kit in the first place, it comes in quite expensive. However, I guess you get what you pay for, because when it comes to cleaning floor pans and large flat areas with paint or underseal or any of that stuff on, it eats it off in no time. It's absolutely amazing for that. It's impressive, so it's by far the most impressive thing I've found for removing that sort of stuff. It's not so good for getting around corners and nooks and crannies, as I kind of showed you on the video. I said the biggest issue really is the size of it, physical size of it. So comparing to my angle grinder, it's a good 3 inches longer than an angle grinder. It's not quite as heavy, but it is heavy enough to make your arm hurt when you're upside down for an hour. Yeah, so getting around nooks and crannies is a bit of an issue, and also because the bristles aren't overly long, you don't have much depth there, so it's hard to get into any recesses unless they're fairly shallow. So there are disadvantages, but say for clearing the pan, the main face of the pan, absolutely monstered it. There are other kits online which are similar and maybe better for going around nooks and crannies, I'm not sure. So this is the 110 electric version. I believe there's a pneumatic version of the Monty Bristle Blaster, which I think is physically a little bit smaller, so that might be better for that sort of thing. And you'll probably come across the MXB Die Blaster at some point, which I believe is physically smaller still and pneumatic as well. I think it only uses a small 12mm wheels, thin wheels in that one. And also it doesn't have the accelerator bar, so if you don't have the accelerator bar it basically just scratches off the underseal and paint and stuff, but it doesn't give that shot blast effect because that obviously flicks the bristles. So I guess you take your choices again, but the Die Blaster comes in quite a bit cheaper than the Bristle Blaster, so It depends what you want ultimately. But yeah, really impressed overall. Thank you again for the loan. And I guess the only other disadvantage is you end up looking like a pirate coal miner. Arr.